but I guess my grandpa, he spoke German, but I think he's from Bavaria, I think. And of course my grandmother, I guess, she was kind of a housekeeper for people or something like that, see? And of course they're very poor, because she always talked about they'd have to walk the tracks, they fell out off the coal cars on the railroad, you know, to get heat and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how they got here, how they got into America. I suppose like the Irish did, I guess. Somebody, I know my grandfather, he belonged to a lot of German fraternity things, you know. Oh, well, when I grew up, yeah, I was over there all the time with my grandpa and my grandmas, yeah. And then when they moved down on the farm, he bought the farm, and then he, for some reason, he never lived on it for a while. I think Joe Hufford talked him into do that, and then but then they decided to move down there. And of course, my Uncle Nick or my Uncle Joe used to, on Wednesday, would take him and I in the summertime, because he had this big, what do I want to say, the plant, a garden. So we would go down there and hoe it up and do whatever was necessary, and then they'd come down on Saturday and pick us up and take us back home. You know, yeah, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. He and my grandmother too. You know, I know one time there I remember my Uncle Joe was down there too, and when I left, my dad, you know, to come to get me then. Well, everybody was crying and everything, and Grandma gave me a box of chocolates, which was really something back there, you know. But I like to, down there, they, you know, the people just work so hard, you know. They didn't have, at Frank Shaw, he did the farming for my grandfather. He only had 40 acres, which wasn't very good, I think, and some of it was a little bit hilly where the house was, but he just had that one field. And he tried to grow things in there, but so in any farm, of course, I think that farm had 82 acres, but you could only farm about 30 of it because it was so hilly, you know, and particularly you could farm more like the house, the field on the house, you know, you see there. Well, you could do that with a horse and a plow, but you couldn't do it with a tractor because it's too steep. So then they had those back ones there. I don't know how many. They were kind of a hill, but they raised corn and so, like I say, those guys, like those kids and everything, they would get over there like 6 o'clock in the morning when daybreak, and you feed them. You had to feed them lunch, and then they left, and then they leave. They worked till dark, and they got $1, you know, to Horton, and we're glad to get it, you know. So of course, I always kind of felt like I was the city slicker, you know. The kids never, they were barefooted all the time, except I guess many went to school, you know. Of course, I always wore shoes, you know. I never, I was able to do that, but of course that was the other thing. You get a pair of shoes for $2, $1.90 down to Gilbert Shoe Company. I still remember. Where the Gilberts of a D4. How'd that go? Where the Gilbert of a D4, ready making shoes. I can't say it now. Where the Gilbert Armies were advertised the Gilbert store. Well, anyway, and of course, people flocked in there. You know, they had shoes. They had shoes all over the place. You know, and you get if you get a pretty good pair of shoes for a couple of dollars. You know, of course, they don't. For some reason, they didn't seem to last too long. But of course, when you're little like that, you was out in the alley, running through water, running down, that kind of stuff. So I remember, yeah, with Tom McCann, I bought a pair of Tom McCann shoes. They were $3.30. And boy, you thought you was living high then. Yeah, then you got to have a pair. And then another one come out. I can't remember that. It was like $4.99. Was it Roberts or something like that? But those Tom McCann shoes, in the same way with the collar on the shirt. What was that there? When you got one of those, you had a pretty good shirt, But they was very few of what I could say. If he only made like $9 a week, and he had there were 4 of them there, and him, their mom, and Nick, and Joe, and Art, and so. Of course, my grandma was a good cook, and they saved. She could milk and go sour. She'd make cottage cheese out of it. They could do anything, And I think Mom learned a little bit of that from her, Yeah, my grandma, she was. I bet she didn't weigh 90 pounds as long as I knew her, Of course, when Mom or Joe and Nick, my grandmother never spoke English. So of course, when I was down there, I got so I could understand her and she could understand me, but of course, Grandpa he could spoke. He worked on the railroad there, and he could speak English pretty good, Of course, like I say, when Grandma was around, everybody talked German, so she knew what was going on. She was a very frail woman, but a good hard worker, like women were back then. She did all the housekeeping and all the cleaning and all that kind of stuff. And they went to mass every Sunday. And one morning my grandma got hit with a car and broke her leg, and so she was laid up there. I remember down in the dining room. She didn't go upstairs naturally anymore. Of course, my grandfather, he was a car inspector, I guess, and then I know also of course, he had all the crossings. They had guys with lanterns, stopping. And I know there, for a long time there, my Uncle Joe, we'd always go down there every night. I guess he'd get off at 5 o'clock or whatever time it was. We'd go down and pick him up down at the crossing down there on Lancaster Road there, and. But I understood he only made like $9 a week, and of course whatever he brought home, why my grandmother saved 10% or whatever it was. So of course back then you didn't have all this price. If you wanted a car, you had to pay for it. You couldn't put a down payment on it. It was a long time before they started to do that. Of course, my grandfather never owned a car, but of course my Uncle Nick and all the boys, there were 3 boys there, they always had some kind of a car. And of course, like I say, I'd go to picture show on Saturday afternoon for a nickel. Just money, nobody had any money, And of course, my grandpa and my grandma, I guess they had a house there on Bruck Street between Thurman and Deshler, and the city wanted to build that Barrett High School. So I think he got a pretty good piece of money for that. That's how he was able to buy the double that we lived in down on Gate Street. Well, it was right there between, it used to be Schiller Street, but then during the war, the German, they got rid, it was Washington Street and Parsons Avenue. And because every time the fire engine, we'd all run up Parsons Avenue to watch the fire engines go by. And go the other thing, when you used to be playing ball or something, and an airplane would go over, you stopped everything just to look at that thing and see if it had 1 wings or 2 wings, And of course, the air thing was hardly anything. I remember when I was over at my grandmother's house, and my Uncle Joe, he was single and he was still living home, and he was reading to them about Lindbergh flying over the ocean, which was really something back then, Of course, the neighborhood was, I guess we were about, the Hermans, when they were on, there were not too many Catholic people with our block. So being close to, I read that thing about St. Leo's there, that 100-year, that the Father Kessler, my mom always talked about him, how great he was, and he started the church and the school, and in 3 years he had everything paid off, So, because I remember, of course, I remember my grandparents, they on the pews, they had a little box out there, and you rented that pew, you know. That's where you're supposed to go, you know. I don't know what it cost, probably $5 a year. I don't know what it cost, but of course, I thought St. Leo's they were really good, you know. My dad, he went in, he started a practice up at Whittier and Parsons. There was about four stores in there, and he got that. But he never did very well. I think he might have been a better optometrist than he was at Buzzcall, because one time Mom showed me the book, and about half the people in the South End owed him money, you know. Of course, now again, in the Depression, people didn't have money, you know. They had the WPA. You got what, $16 a week to feed a family. Of course, everything was cheaper again. You know, you get a quart of milk for a nickel, you know, and a loaf of bread for a nickel. And I remember we used to go down a market on Saturday night because they were closing out. We'd buy the fruit that everybody wanted to get rid of it for. And I guess when he went in the Army, he was kind of a stocky guy. But when he come out, he lost a lot of weight, wasn't really feeling good. So they decided he would go down to the farm. Grandpa, I don't think, had the farm yet, or maybe he had the farm, but there was nobody in it. But then Hufford's Joe and Joe Hufford, what was her name? But anyway, so they thought, put him down there for the summertime. He goes out and works in the field, gets a good meal every day, or three good meals every day, that he'd pick up weight. But he didn't, you know. I don't know. I guess it was working on him, you know, then. So then he come home and went to work, you know. He went, like I say, he went in business for himself, but he did, for some reason, he just he couldn't do it. I guess he kind of, like I say, I think he would give too much stuff away. You know, of course, back there, a lot of these people didn't have the money to pay. You know, but if they needed a pair of glasses, why, he would do it. And I think also he was pretty honest. He wouldn't give you a pair unless you needed it, because we had neighbors. Their names were Keating, and he went up to see Dad, and my dad examined his eyes and said, you know, he really didn't need glasses, you know. But then about a couple of weeks later, looked over there, he went to another guy and he had a pair of glasses. And so, like I say, my dad, he never talked much about, he never really talked much about Ireland or about the service, you know. I don't know why. Now, of course, like I say, we'd be bottling off beer. He made 10 gallons. Was that 10 gallons or 5 gallons? Must have been 10 gallons, a big crock. And then my grandfather did too, and my Uncle Joe. So I capped it. And I put the cap on it. They always made sure I had to get the ring in there. We never had any blow up on the shelves like the rest of them, because they drink us that fast, you know. They would. In fact, sometimes they couldn't. I think you had to have them in there for 72 hours for that to brew, and then was kind of a scum come up on it, you know. Well, they'd go down there and push that out of the way and get a pan, put it in there, bring it upstairs, when it wasn't really either ready yet. So, and you every once in a while, I guess they put it on the shelf, and it stayed there too long, it would explode, you know, and break the bottle, and but like I say, we never had none of that around there. The only thing I can remember, he was telling me about one of his brothers. I don't know. He was. They had some kind of a thing going on in school, and this other boy was a Protestant boy, and my dad was telling me his brother was the smartest of the two, but of course, I guess the Protestants were in power, I guess you'd say. So they give it to the other guy, you know. But like I say, I can't remember him. That's about the only thing I can remember him saying. I remember the other thing I remember, you know. Of course, he was a little short, you know. My Uncle Nick was not. My Uncle Joe was pretty tall, and But anyway, I think he was kind of short, and I kind of think that they probably kids were gonna come on, what, get off your knees and that kind of stuff, because he told me, he said they can have fun with me. He says, but I'll be here when they're all gone. Well, he was the first to go, so. Back there, and he had cancer of the stomach there, and back then I couldn't do a whole lot, for him. In fact, we had a St. Patrick's Day party at the house for the Forsters, and he never went to work after that. He always went to work every day. So they went up there, and they took him up there, and they opened him up, and I guess it was too far gone. They told him, give him about 6 weeks to live. Well, that's St. Patrick's Day on March 17th, and he was dead May 6th. So it was they had that right, but that's about all. Of course, Dr. Anderlin, he was a doctor. He of course he'd all come around to the house all the time, and he told the mom he just couldn't think that he couldn't believe that that's what he had. And when he was dying, he just wouldn't go, and he was laid up a long time. And of course, I know that a lot of the Forsters come over to see him on a Sunday afternoon, and they talked to how good he looked, and he had some color in his face and everything. But then there's a doctor. What was that doctor's name up on? I guess he was in a lot of pain, and I don't know where his doctor was, but Mom went up to talk to this doctor and asked him, he said, would you please come down and give him hypodermic, as they called it then. And no, he wasn't his patient because he couldn't do it, and of course Mom never did forgive him for that. And I don't know why he couldn't have done it, but maybe that's the way they was. When you had a patient, you couldn't go to another. So then he finally he called me up there one time. Of course, I was only 12 years old, and told me, that he's going to go, and wanted me to do what I could do, to help Mom. And of course, what could I do when I was 12 years old? The only thing I could get is a paper out, and of course, be lucky to get that. I was playing. We played shinny in the alley so my Uncle Nick come out and said, you better get up there, to see your dad, because it's not good. Of course, I guess I didn't realize, how important it was and everything. And I know, of course, Mom, she was praying her prayer too, and so he talked to me, like I told you there, and since I was the oldest, I was supposed to help him out, my mother, and oh yeah, he just, I can't remember that I was really there just at the moment that he died, but I was there. Well, I was there before they took him away. I know that. Of course, he was, like I say, I guess he was in a lot of pain, and whatever they was giving him was not doing the job as it should have been. Like a hypodermic. I don't know what that was, but then, like I say, he was so bad that, like I say, Mom went up to this doctor, Dr. Hayjos was this guy's name, and he said no, he couldn't come down because. And she never forgave him for that, So they always took the body home in the living room. They didn't have parlors like we have now. So and they would, oh God, people streamed through there all the time. The coffin was open, and of course, again, they didn't have limousines and everything to haul you around either. You got in, if you had a car, you drove it out to the cemetery when he went out. I think that, Grandpa and Grandma helped him a lot, and I think the rest of the family did. They always seen that we had something for Christmas, and that's because, times she got on some kind of a mother's pension, was like, I think it was like $40 a month, but there was he only had like $2,000 insurance when everything was over, and of course $2,000 back was fine, but not when you have 7 kids and no other income coming in. We'd, like I said, we'd always go to market late. In fact, June got mad a couple of times. We'd go down. Before I could go up and see her, I had to do that. So he said, well, it's just time you get up here, we got no time to do anything. And I said, well, that's the way it is, you know. I could drive. Of course, back then you didn't have no licenses either. You know, a couple of times I never. Of course, only one time I took the car, and got into trouble, but I never drove it without her with me, and I got pulled over several times. And of course, when Mom would explain the situation, well, they tell me to go ahead. You know, they didn't bother me. I think, you know, my grandfather wanted us to move to the farm because he thought that was going to be a good place for us. But like I say, there was no electricity, no water. You had to go pump all the water and that kind of stuff. And I think Mom kind of had a kind of nervous breakdown over all this. She just wasn't up to it, you know. And how are we going to get the kids to school and that stuff like that? I guess maybe the school. I guess they did have a school bus. You know, the first paper out I only had 23 customers, and I run over the whole South End, you know. And so then somehow I got to that dispatch paper station. It was on Mohawk Street above Whittier. Now there was one down on Stewart Avenue. I don't know why. I guess, of course, I was carrying papers out. That one was over on the other street, Lozelle and something. Again, the citizens thing was they just had a little, what I want to say, not a. The station was just a little shanty-like, you know, and so that's how I got it, you know. And of course, then George got one, and then Dunk got one, and we all. One good thing by German, of course, my grandma, she never did talk English, you know. Grandpa, he worked and everything. But anyway, on Mohawk Street there's a row of flats, and one of them was vacant. And now what's this guy's name? There was one guy carrying papers, you know, his impression. He was out of high school, but he couldn't get a job, so he's still carrying papers. Back then, you could get I could carry a paper to. I may have another route, but I carry paper art now, you know. So anyway, and of course he got off. He wasn't working, so he was out of station out, and but anyway, I want to come around there. Somebody had moved in there, and so I thought, well, I'm going to ask him. So I knocked on the door on this lady, and I told her, you know, I carried the papers. Would she like to pay? Well, she said, there's a fellow here earlier today that he's going to go back tonight and see my husband. And so I thought to myself, I bet he couldn't understand that German. So I come back that night, and of course, I guess he didn't. What was Stainer? What was his name? But anyway, so I got the customer. And every Friday when I collected, she'd always give me some kind of pastries that she cooked. You know, I thought she was one of my best customers. You know? But that's one time knowing a little bit of German, I could get along. I could understand. In fact, when I went to high school, I took German because I thought I'd know most of it. But I guess must have all kind of what do you call them in them? They speak from different places. You know. Bob Emmons says all those big stone houses around Schiller Park now, he says they're selling those for $1 million. Well, I carried papers up there, you know, and my first route was on City Park between Beck and Livingston and the streets over to High Street. And of course, it was the middle of the Depression there. They're moving people out on the street. They just move them out, you know. And then the next route I got, I was on 3rd Street from Whittier to Sycamore, and the streets over to Mohawk, and there was all good German. There was a good paying. A lot of times, you know, if you take a daily and Sunday paper, it was like the daily paper was only a penny. It was 16 cents. Well, a lot of times they didn't have 16 cents, you know, so you wouldn't get paid. Of course, when you always had to pay your bill on Saturday morning, whether you one way or the other, you know. So a lot of times people would put you off for 2 or 3 weeks till they get the money. You know, they just didn't have it. You know, so that was. So then when on Sunday morning you had to be down the station at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you didn't get down, or say sent somebody out to get you. So by this time, Dunk had a route and George had a route, and of course I had St. Mary's there. So we'd go to 5 o'clock mass, and then go over and get our papers, and then we'd carry my route, and then we'd carry George's route. It was over there next to High Street, and then Dunk was down there on Gage Street, right off of High Street. So that's how I would drive the car, and they'd throw the papers. But that was a pretty good deal. So. Dad died, so I got a job mopping the front porch and the back porch, and I think I got $2, I think, for that. So of course I had to take it home and give it to Mom. But the nuns were good, you know. When he died, they all come over with a lot of stuff. And he was, I was glad the kids got, when we got, I was glad that we got it back in St. Leo's when I come back from Indianapolis, you know. So that's how I met you. And when I met your mother. Rita brought her home a couple times, you know, and I didn't pay much attention to her because I got off work at 5 o'clock, and I played softball down there in that church league down in Southwood. So I had to run home, get my meal, and run down, get my clothes changed a little bit, and run down there. So I never really paid a whole lot of attention to her. But then Rita fixed us up as a blind date to go some kind of a dance or something in the South End. He was having democratic things. Me and my Uncle Joe become kind of big kind buddies. He'd give me a note. I'd always go up every night and get him a package of cigarettes, and then he'd give me a nickel to get a popsicle. So I took the same note up every night. After a while, I guess they got to know me or something. You know, I did that for a long time, going up and get a package of cigarettes. So I don't know what cigarettes were, whatever maybe they might have been a dime or something. I don't know what they were, because they used to roll their own a lot, you know. Well, when I was carrying papers, why, I got to know Don Boley and Ralph Fisher. Ralph Fisher had a big birthmark on his face, but that's what we did mostly. We would get the Sunday paper and we would look and see what was there, and we might go 2 or 3 times a week to. Of course, it wasn't hardly anything to get in, you know. And of course, when you took a girl out on a date, you went to the movie, and then maybe take her out and get her a hamburger sandwich or something like that, and that was a date, you know. So. But back there, we never called anybody by their first name. We had a nickname, Dunk. Of course, Dunk's father worked for the a big. They put in a lot of like toilet stuff, you know. What I want to say, but anyway, he went out to Urbana one time and worked out there for a week or so. When he come back, he had this little donkey piggy bank for Dunk. He started calling him Dunk. And I don't think anybody knew his name was Howard, you know, all those years. So he went by Dunk. And Sam was, how they call him Gooch. And of course, Dick was Ike. I don't know why he was Ike. And then Don, of course, had red hair. He was Red, and I was Mac. And so, like I say, we never called anybody really by their first name. So, but it was a good bunch of guys. You know, we was all kind of nobody drank or anything. You know, found out later on that Ralph Fisher was marking the cards when we played penny ante poker. So. But he was called Doc because he was kind of a sub on a South High a basketball team, but I guess when he called, he had his thing like a doctor. He had all this medicine stuff in there, carried that with him. So they called him Doc Fisher. There was a park down there just on the east side there, Edgewater Park it was, and they had slot machines, and of course we'd go down there all the time. We didn't have anything, and of course every time we come back broke, didn't have brains enough to know that we were never going to win anything, you know. And then old Ralph Fisher, we went down to Circleville Pumpkin Show one time, and this guy got him one of these roll-on things where you roll the balls down, and if you got them all down to the bottom or something, you got paid, you know. So but you had to do it 3 times or something. And how was it? There's several balls. But anyway, when you first start, they get it right, but not enough, you know. So finally he lost all his money, and of course he had 2 times, but he couldn't get the 3rd. So we went back over there, and he says, "Can you lend me any money? Can you lend me any money?" I said, I said, "Ralph, well, the only thing I got is Mom give me some money to pay the gas bill." I says, "Will you give that back to me tomorrow?" "Oh, yeah." He said, "Well, I give it to him," and he lost that too. But he come over on the lunch hour the next day and give me my money so I could go up and pay. I used to walk up there, pay the gas and electric bill. Walked up there to do that, you know, when it's downtown. So old Ralph, he was a good guy. Well, I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure my grandfather, the grandma didn't charge Mom any rent. And when Dad died, my grandpa got the idea that that'd be a good farm, would be a good place for her to raise the kids. Well, when back then there wasn't no water, you know, there was no electricity, and so it was just too much for her, you know. So they decided to move her back. Well, of course, in the meantime, a family had moved in there. So then my grandma and grandpa had to get out and go down to the farm and live. See, but that's the way they did things. They really were very good family related, you know. Of course, like I say, I was the oldest, and I suppose I was kind of the pet, you know. But I was always over there, and in fact, I spent more time with my Uncle Joe than I did my dad, because my dad, he worked at 6 o'clock every day, and except Saturday, he worked at 9 o'clock on Saturday night. So and like I say, about the only time I got to see him when we was bottling off the home brew that they made, you know. And we always walked to church, no matter what it was. You never got the car out for that, you know. So the car was in the garage, and like I say, after Mass, after we ate, or we either go to the farm or go someplace that they've never been before, you know. Like we'd go through Arlington or something, look at all those big homes, you know, and about that time they cost like $50,000 a year, and you could think of how was you ever going to get $50,000? In fact, I always say my goal in life when I graduated from high school was to make $50 a week. I thought back then if I could have made $50 a week, I'd have been pretty well. I wouldn't be rich, but I wouldn't have no problem if I'd handled the money right. So. But again, back then you could let stuff lay around. Hardly anybody would bother. Of course, I suppose there are always people trying to steal something, but your house and everything, you didn't have to keep it locked up or anything. That's what I used to get on June there. I said, your mother there. I said, well, you got this place locked up like this, you know. It looked like Fort Knox around here. But now I got everything double bolted, you know. Because it's just a whole different thing, you know. You didn't have to worry. If somebody told you something, you believed him, and he was telling you the truth, you know. So. And of course, my Uncle Nick, he was, I guess, a pretty good mechanic. And of course, as I say, they had the cars, so they fixed their own cars, you know. And he always told a story that I was always out there fooling around, and he getting ready to put it all back together. And couldn't find a bolt. That's when I had been there. And he was frantic. What is he going to do? He had no way to get there. So then he said, well, maybe I put it in the grease can. There it was. So I guess maybe I did. Well, but again, why would I put it in the grease can? I don't know. But of course, I was always out there when they were working. I was always out there, kind of standing behind them to see what they were doing and everything. We went to picture show down at Gates and Parsons, and the thing was terrible. So we come out, and there was Frank Distelzweig and his brother Bill and Dunk and me, I think, yeah. So anyway, I don't know, we stand out there in the corner, and it was like I'll say it was like 10:30, and somebody says, why don't we take a ride in your car, and we'll try to get back in town by 12 o'clock. And I said, well, so I don't know why I did, but I did it, So we went down Parsons Avenue all the way down to that 315 or 362, and over to High Street. Was coming up High Street by Hartman Farm. I couldn't think of that name the other day, Hartman Farm. And this guy was trying to pass me, and it was pouring down rain, and he hit me so hard that the spring bent like a and the car was just lifted up, and if that big fence hadn't been there, why, we would have rolled over. And so we get out of the goddamn, and we had the spare tire on the back, and I don't know, for some reason I didn't want to leave the car. I couldn't, them disc wheels, it bent them at the axle, you couldn't, the wheels wouldn't go around. So there we are out there. So we're walking home, and I got this tire, yeah. And so Distelzweig's aunt or somebody lived way down on High Street, and we got there about 3:30 in the morning, from walking way down there. So then Mr. Distelzweig come over and took me home, and who was the other? I guess Dunk. But anyway, of course, in the meantime, I guess Mom, she used to say, she'd prayed every night, going to the bathroom, and she said that she looked in the bedroom and I wasn't there. So then she went out, and the car wasn't there. So I finally got home. Of course, she's waiting up for me. I guess naturally she was worried about me. Then I really got the riot act. She made, and then Parker Rary was the guy living in the flats on the other side there. He'd do little things, and he's a pretty good mechanic. So she called him over. So we went down to the car, and we went down to look at it, and he said, well, we have to get two wheels. And so we got the two wheels, went back to the junkyard and got the two wheels and took it. And then, of course, it had scraped the top, was kind of wood there. It was a 1926 Chevrolet, four-door sedan. That's the doors back in those days opened up from the back, either front and I don't know why. And that's how Tom got. When we went to the cemetery, the door was ajar, and Tom went to open it to close it, and of course the wind caught it, threw him right out on the street, on the road. So I got sidetracked. What was I talking about? So Mom made all the guys pay $5. Cause I think that's probably what I think of Parker. I think when he charged her for what he had to buy, and of course back then you could how things were. I remember how things were there. We was going to the lake one Friday night. We always would go there for fish fries when Art now, and the connecting rod in the car burned out, and we was just getting through Reynoldsburg, and it was on a hill. So I got turned around, and boy, that road. So I had to turn the motor off because I thought it was going to blow up. But there was the downhill there. So I was coasting. I coasted into a gas station and service station there. And the guy looked down. He says, "Well, that connecting rod's going." He says, "I said, what can you do?" He said, "Oh, I'll put one in for you." So he puts it on the rack there and takes the pan off, and puts a new connecting rod on. We went out to the lake. Can you believe that? How they did that back then? Of course, I guess that was a pretty simple job. But it was hooked onto the piston somehow, and the bearing was shot in it, you know. So I don't know what caused that, but it did. But I guess that happened a lot to cars, you know. Connecting rod would burn out or break or something. They had a panel of citizens in the neighborhood, like something like in voting booth, you know, precincts or something, and they had your name and everything, and then you would go up. They call you in, and they want to know any reason why you can't go, any ways why you can't go. Well, I told, you know, I was living home, and so I was giving Mom a little bit of money. I didn't make very much money, but I guess I didn't make enough that she could get along without me. I guess that's what they tell me. I was drafted.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I went in October 6th in 1941, and then I come out in October 4th. So I was in there 2 days, less than 4 years. I was overseas 32 months. So then they give us an order we had to go up there, Fort Hayes up there, get on the train, and we went down to Mineral Wells. And so when we got down there, they split us all up in things. I was in a heavy weapons company, but then of course, after all that, we went through all that. When I got out to California, they gave me an M1 rifle. I never saw it before. So we had to learn how to operate that and tear it apart and all that kind of stuff. So that's some of the way the Army does things. they give you, well, we had 3 or 4 months training there, but and then when we get out there, they give us something we never ever saw again. I suppose all the rifle guys went into heavy weapons. I don't know. You see, but that's the way it was. Of course, we got down there in October. It was always pretty hot down there. You know, they always 120 in the shade and no shade, and everything was dry. You know, because when you had to watch you don't catch fires on when you firing. You know, what kind of bullets? The tracer bullets. I know a lot, but I can't think of it. So I go. Of course, I got through that with no trouble. You know. So then from then, we went. We had the orders. We went to Hawaii first, you know, and we was on Oahu there, and we was on there for just a little bit, and then of course they put us over on Maui. And Maui at that time, we was the first troops on there, and Maui had nothing, but the Navy had just a little fighter strip there. That's all. There wasn't no airplanes flying in there except them. Well, when I was drafted, we went to Mineral Wells, Camp Walters, and that's when your mother come down, and we got married. And of course, that's on October 22nd, and of course the war broke out on December 7th. Of course, when all this was happening, I thought we was going to only be in for a year. I could take a basic training. That's what we were drafted to do. See, and of course that turned out to be different, you know. And of course, when I went to the chaplain there to get married, he must have known something, because I'd recommend you not get married now, because you may be going here sooner than you think. But she wanted to get married, so we got married, and so she stayed down there, and she made typed the lunch menus to get her lunch, because my first Army pay was $6. The time they took out some insurance and they had some laundry, and of course it wasn't quite a month. Why, that was $6, and the $6 was pretty good back here, but didn't go a whole lot, you know. Of course, then we sold the car I had to George. He bought it, and then we had a little money then, you know. So that's what we did. It's best thing I ever did, I think, you know. But of course, it did turn out pretty good. Everything turned out. In a lot of ways, I was very fortunate. And of course, we never had any problems. It seemed like the morale, even though you're doing it, was always pretty good, all pretty high. You know, of course, our guys, they just bitch about everything in the Army, you know. but then when it comes time to do it, they do it. See, how they always say, you know, you don't have to do what they say, but how's that go? You don't have to do what they say, but they'll make you wish you had. It's kind of hard to get promoted in there because they have what they call a tail of. You can only have so many non-coms in a company, you know, or even in a squad, you know, and so I never worried about that, you know. I knew that wasn't going to nothing. I wasn't going to get make except private first class, and that was what $36 a month. And then of course when we were married, they took $22 out of that for me, and then June she got a $50 check and went to her. So, and like I say, we had very, very few married people in. That's what I say about this war. All these guys are over there. They're 30, 35 years old. All got families and everything. Now they're taking them over there, but that wasn't. I don't think that was the case then, because all the draftees, you know, I think you had anywhere from 18 to 21. When I was in the Army, I was pretty popular because I didn't drink beer and I didn't smoke cigarettes. And when we got them issued, everybody wanted me to you know, can I have a package? So we supposed to I think get a carton every week, but sometimes we wouldn't get it. Maybe we'd only get 5 or 6 packages. So but of course I got 10 packages promised. So finally I said that's too much problem. So Roger Limley was a guy from Springfield out there, and we were pretty good friends. So I give him my cigarettes, and of course I told you about Roy Latter. Roy Latter, if he had a bottle of beer in his hand, I don't care if the bud was this thick, he had a smile on his face. In fact, we called him Ha. So I gave him all my beer, and so I just tell him, you know, what I did. Now, if he wants to give you some of it, well, that's okay. I don't know. I don't know, and Roy, he probably wouldn't give it away. but well, I had some of the guys there. They would save it and then raffle it off, you know. So I never wanted to do that, you know. That's not. Everybody asked me how I smoked. I said, well, I think I smoked about 10 cigarettes maybe my whole life, because Jake and I would get in there and roll our own, and then we take a walk and smoke them. Well, I never got anything out of that. And of course, Jake, he started to be a pretty heavy smoker, you know. But it didn't affect me at all. So that's why I didn't care to do it. I didn't like it, actually, you know. So and then we used to smoke those cigar things fell out of the trees. You don't see those trees anymore. What kind of trees were theirs? But anyway, they dried. You can light the end of it and smoke a little bit. You know, that's what the farmer boys did down on the farm. You know, what was the name of that tree? Well, I'm like that guy told me. I know a lot, but I can't think of it. Like I say, well, Mom come out to see us right before I went overseas, you know. She come out there to California, Salinas. We lived in, June had a room in Salinas with this lady. She was a very nice, a couple other couples that was in there. She'd fix them a pretty nice meal, and only charge you like 50 cents for it or something. And of course, that Salinas at that time was the cleanest town I ever saw. Everything was clean and just as nice as it could be. But again, we had to walk every place, and that wasn't too much transportation. But other than that, it was nice. So when we went overseas, why, of course, you're way down in the hold of the thing, and it was an old German ship from that was, I guess, from World War I, and of course the food on that was terrible, you know, and so then going over, then after I don't know how long we was in Hawaii there and around there, but it must have been 8 or 9 months. Well, in the meantime, when it come down to go down to the Pacific, why we got the thing. But by that time, the Navy had taken it over, and it was all cleaned up, you know. And they did the cooking. It was pretty good, yeah. But I guess those cooks in the Army there, they not too good on land. They get on the water. They weren't very. But again, like you say, you can't get a T-bone steak if you got a piece of mutton or something you're trying to. It smells real bad that you're trying to cook, you know. So then we were there, and of course we had to set everything up. We tried the war, and I guess was on here, and so we had to dig a lot of gun positions all the way around the island, you know. And of course, like the Army, we had to cut down all these coconut trees and get it. But then one night the tank come in, filled it all up, had to move it back and do it over again. See, so a lot of little things like that. But so that was then from there, of course, and then from there we went to Maui. Went over to Molokai. I don't know why we went there. There was another unit there that some of them, I know. Red Perry was my buddy. He was a gambler, you know, and he was playing I guess the Filipinos up there when they shot crap, you know, like fives and sevens or nines. You're supposed that's you know, that's 2 to 1 or something. See, well, of course they would bet even, you know. Of course he was cleaning up all the time. So he'd come down, and I was down the headquarters company there, and we was in an old. I guess you would call it a, let's see, what is it? Where the golfers work at, what would you call that? The clubhouse, I guess. And so they had a tennis court there, so I started playing tennis a little bit there. And that captain, what was his name, Captain? What? He was, I played with him a little bit, but he was way too much for me. And then they had this Jewish guy there I got to know, and he was going to get me. In the meantime, I took OCS. I wanted to, of course, when I wanted to try to get into medical, I didn't want to lead a squad or something in combat. I don't think I was up to that. So he was going to get me in there, and of course I passed it, but they couldn't, for some reason I couldn't get out of there. I still there. So. I know that one guy there, when I told him I went to Aquinas, he told all the rest of those officers there that when you come out of there, you're a good guy, you know. And of course, that I think that was true. So then, one day, Red come down and they had a little fountain thing there, you know, get milkshakes or something. So he bought them with him. So we spent about an hour or so together talking and everything. So then we went back and so I wanted to pay. No, he says, you got to pay. So he opened his billfold and he had like $300 that he had won. And he says, and then he had some little in reserve, the way he said it. But then he says, so he had a girlfriend back home, and so he was sending her a lot of money, and his mother too. And so I said, how much money do you think you have back there? He says, well, I got 8,000, and I might be pretty close to 10,000. Now that's how much money he won, playing with guys that were making $36 a month. You know, of course, there was the pay wasn't nothing like it is today, if I recall right. A PFC got 30, a PFC got 36, a corporal got 42, a sergeant got 54, a staff sergeant got 66, I think it was, and then we had what was the next grade? Either a main. See, I can't say that, but anyway, I think the highest grade you get would be $84 a month. Yeah, of course, all the guys a long time in there, they were there, you know. Master Sergeant was one of them, and then I guess that was it. So that was about what I did there till we went. So from there we went down. We had to go back to Oahu, and we took a lot of amphibious training. You know, to getting in and out of the boats. You know, climbing up the nets to get on the boat. So from there we went down to Guadalcanal then, and so of course when we got there, of course the Marines had taken care of practically everything. You know, they. Like I think I told you before, they'd always say, "The war must be over, 'cause here comes the army," you know. And of course that was like 6 degrees below the equator, and it was really hot, you know. And of course there was all those jungles and things. Most of the time you had to wear your pants with your leggings tied and what's called because of the rats and things around there, you know, and some of the bugs. A lot of guys got sick from that, you know. So. But I never did that either. So that was it. And then from there we went up to New Britain, Ireland. And of course, the highest reserves, they were on Bougainville. And of course, bring it back. One night, why they called us all out. I guess the Japanese up in Bougainville were launching a counterattack, and so they were loading ammunition for those guys up there. And so we of course was always in a big hurry, and so but I had my belt on, but I didn't take my cup. And of course we worked there, you know, about midnight. They come around, wanted some coffee. Well, and then I didn't have my cup, so I wanted some coffee. So I cleaned out a K-ration can or something, and got my coffee, and then I got ptomaine poisoning. So I ended up in the hospital. God. So then, as I say, we went up there, and again we just replaced a lot of. And when you went up there in a landing craft. You know, those things that hit them. But there had been a lot of. The cemetery we went out to look at. There were a lot of crosses in it. I was. See, the problem down when you're down there, you didn't know what was going on in the rest of the world. You know, we didn't have any radios, we didn't have anything to do, and once in a while somebody said, well, when they talked, what was the islands out there close to us? They had the big turn. About when the thing turned around, because we sank a lot of Japanese ships there. Not May. What was the island? Was it May Islands? Well, whatever it was. So that was like I say, that was it, you know. Then, of course, like I say, when we got, so then we had a rotation, and I was 44th on the roster, and when he pulled out and they got these, we didn't have bingo, we had those Keno things, little round things. So he had them and he shook them all up, and then when he pulled them out, and the first thing that it was 3 of us eligible to go in the headquarters company. So when he called one number, and then next time was 40. When he said 40, I knew he was going to say something else besides, and he said 44. Well, of course I couldn't believe that. So then they shipped it, and then they put us back down on New Guinea in a rotation detachment, and we from there we. Like I said, I met a guy from the South End. I never really knew him well, but he told me, what you want to do is go down there and volunteer, because when you do that, you can, first of all, you can get yourself on orders and your friends if you want to do it. Then the best thing was you could go to the mess hall anytime you wanted to. Because sometimes, I know one time John McLoughlin and I, we sat on this rock, I don't know where we were, but the mess hall was way down there, and we sat there about 4 hours, and we were sitting still. We were still sitting there because we were going to get in the line when it got short, but it never got short. So we had never finally we did get in, you know. So that's, of course, I guess that's about the only way you could feed her. Of course, a lot of guys, you know. Well, yeah, most of the time he was laying on the ground when he was there, but sometimes you. One time we was down in a jungle somewhere there, and they had hammocks for us, you know, and I guess again a lot of times the rats run around from those coconut trees, you know. So I know one night I had one in there with me in my somehow he got in there, and I'm trying to get him out, and he's trying to get out. Scared me to death, because if he bit you or something, you had trouble. See, so but he didn't. So that was probably, well, at least you were dry there. Of course, the other thing is you never got a shower. You know, you wore the same clothes a day in and day out, and so unless you get around a creek or something. And in Hawaii there, we got the irrigation things, you know, well there. So we got it in that place. We was up by one of those. So we got up there and scrubbed that all out, and then the water would come through there, and we could either sit in there or stand up and kind of shower. But the water was cold, you know. I always said when I get to be 40, I'll be stiff and sore because it was hot, and then that water. I don't know why the water was so cold, but the water was cold compared to what the outside temperature was. So I guess the meals are like you get used to it. They say, you know, get on the cooks for everything, but what are you going to do? You know, they only had so much, and when we were on Guadalcanal, they was getting all this mutton in from Australia, and boy, it just reeked. You know, when they had it hanging up, you'd have the whole carcass up there, and you couldn't hardly eat that because of the smell of it. I couldn't. And of course, going down to when we was going over there on the ship there, the Republic was the name of it. We went down to for breakfast and for any. But when the odor would come up in there, you lose your appetite. You know, maybe I'd eat a couple pieces of toast and a cup of coffee or something. That's all I would eat there. You know, so. But again, they don't have much to work with. You know, they can't. They got to cook for you what you got. And of course, I know one time I was on KP, and I was what was I saving? I was serving something. And the guys asked me what it was, and I tell it when I put it in there. But then the mess sergeant come around and he says, "That's not that." What did I say? I thought it was sauerkraut, and it was something else, cabbage or something like that. I don't know what it was, but anyway, you couldn't tell the difference. See, that's the way it was. And of course, like I say, I was fortunate in a lot of ways. You know, I got the homemade. Well, I got that twice when I was in the Army, from drinking stuff or eating stuff that I shouldn't have. You know, when we in Hawaii there, we had to take. I was in the 2 section there, and we had to go on and take reports from all these gun positions we had there all night long, and he was on from 7 at night till 7 in the morning. So I had to go over and eat earlier. So I went over that night, and I come back, and I start to feel very bad. You know, what's the matter with me here? Gagging and everything. So Sergeant come around and said, "How you feeling?" I said, "I'm not feeling good at all." And he said, "Well, there are a lot of us." Of course, when I was vomiting, and diarrhea coming out of me both ends. I thought I was going to die, because when you get like that, when you go to cough and there's nothing in there anymore, it really hurts. So they sent us to a hospital downtown in Honolulu there, but it was just in there overnight, and then we come back, you know. But so I thought there was a little village there, and every one of those guys, they had a little ice cream place, I think he made. So when I took a little walk there, and when I was down there, I bought an ice cream cone or a cup or whatever it was, and so that's what I thought I got sick on. I thought that must have been that, but then he told me, oh, there was a whole gang of us went to the hospital that night. So that was about the only, like I say, the only thing that that's another time I got that. But and of course, like I say, I like the food. I like to. And when you're hungry, you eat. You know. Of course, you got those rations we had. They weren't very good. Spam and all that stuff. And then they come out with the K rations, and they were a little bit better. And but I don't know. I went on a couple patrols when we were down there. We'd go out for about 4 or 5 days, going around. And one time we come on this was on Guadalcanal, yeah, and So anyway, we had this. What was Jackson? This little lieutenant we had. He come there. He was kind of one of these gung ho guys. So anyway, we got up there to there. It was just a squad of us. I'd say I had the radio, and I guess there were probably 12 of us, and him and me. And so we have to report every hour or whatever it was. And so we get up to this little native thing, and he wants to go through, and this, I don't know what he was, the king or the thing, but he says, no, you don't want you to go through. So we backed off, but I guess overnight he got to thinking about it. Next morning, we're going to go through. See, well, we got in there. We thought that there had been maybe some Japanese in there before, but maybe, of course, by that time, a lot of them were now. They were sick and everything. They were. So we, and of course, I always remember at one time we went back and the colonel come out to him and says, "How'd everything go there, Jackson?" Jackson said, "When it gets too tough for everybody, it's just right for old Jackson." That's what he said. And that was about true. You know, I think he would have forced his way through there if that's what he said. I got 12 guys here with rifles. This guy's not going to tell us we can't go through. See? So we went through. But that's about the nearest I come to being really in combat, you know. And I never had, but of course after I left them, they got up into the Philippines. They got into a lot of it there, you know. I know Roy Latta, he lived down on Motor Street, just on 420, and we lived at 416 and 418 on Gate Street. He wasn't married, of course, like most of them was. And of course, when I come home, you know, he said, "Will you be sure to stop and see my mother?" And I said, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll do that." So when I went down there, his mother had died. So I saw him later on, and I said something. I says, "Oh, I wrote him a letter and told him that his mother was dead." Well, he didn't know that. So I guess after he got my letter, a couple of weeks later, he was called in the order room. He says, "We got some bad news for you." And he said, "Well, what's that? Are you going to tell me my mother died?" He said, "Yeah." Now, it took that long to get that to him, that his mother died. I come home, wrote him a letter back, and that she had passed away, and they hadn't told him that till then, see? We had to go up to Washington, and then had to come back down to Indianapolis to get discharged, you know. Of course, on the way home, I saw Herb Herman. He was coming home too. He was in India or something. That was a detachment. They had a big camp down there. So they give you, I don't know. Of course, they give you the train ticket, and I don't know. I think they got a little bit of money too. I don't know, but it wasn't very much. So I got back into town about 11 o'clock, as I recall. You know. Of course, June, your mother wasn't there. Gene was down there. He met me, you know. So, well, when I come back from the Army, I want to buy a new car, and a Chevrolet was a four-door Chevrolet was like $600 and some, and I thought that guy's crazy. You know, I'm never going to get no $600 for a car, but that's what it was. So I ended up, I had to buy a used car. You know, I never had a new car till I bought that Ford. That was that in '66, I think, or something like that. I always had used cars. Well, after I got I worked for the Nicholson Optical Company. Dr. Brower got me a job when I got out of high school just as a delivery boy. You know, they're still kind of in the Depression there. So when I come back, I went back to see Mr. Nicholson, and he said, "Oh yeah, I could have my job back," and I got I get $40 a week, I think I got. So which I thought was pretty good. But again, in the meantime, Kathy had been born, and she might have been even pregnant with Joan by then. I don't know. So I worked there, you know, for a while, and then I took things were kind of getting, well, Mr. Nicholson died. And of course, I was kind of running the place there, but Louis Nichols, his son, well, he was really in charge of it, but he just didn't know how to spend money, buy a car on something like Chuck does, but when he didn't have it. So I don't know how much money they had in the estate, but he went through that. He tried to buy Marty, his sister, out so he could get it. He did that, but he took it out of not out of his pocket, but out of the company's pocket. So we got into a point there one time where we just couldn't pay our bills, or pay the people either. I'd have to be going up to Dr. Brower or Dr. Wright out there to ask them to give me an advance on it, so I was going to meet the payroll. So that's when I decided I had to get out of there so then I talked to, what was his name over at White Haynes. So that's when they was either going to send me to Pittsburgh or to Indianapolis, and they sent me to Indianapolis, I liked Indianapolis. That Jack Gale was really a nice manager, He did everything, and of course it was a lot bigger than anything that I was around. I had not a bit more employees, and of course in the front they had all dispensing operation. Went over to White Haynes. I think I was making $90 a week, which was pretty good. We could buy the house and everything on that, but then, like I say, your mother, she just wasn't like Hoosier hospitality. She wasn't for it. Well, of course, I goes, a lot of people didn't want to come over. You got 4 or 5 kids there running around, and so about the only time we got out was when we went to, we started a square dancing thing over at the church, and that went off. We did that for quite some time till we moved back. We was out there, 52 to 50. We was only out there for 4 years, and that St. Andrew's Church was just was just down the basement. That's all they had done when we was there. He had a nice priest there, though. He always went the kids there. And what was his name? But anyway, he made it funny. I want the kids here, and I don't care how much they cry. I can talk over them. He said, really. And of course the nuns, they all lived there, and we had that hall there, and they had a big cement thing, and we'd watch them. They'd be out there roller skating around when we have those dances. Of course, Indianapolis was just about like Columbus. It was everything was up north and hardly anything down in the south. And of course, we lived on the corner of 34th and Station Street, and that was a nice house. That's when you felt it down and tore your mouth open. My God! And of course, when that was open, that wind would blow up that street, and like I say, the wind caught that screen door, and there was, y'all know if you remember, there was a big platform out there. I guess I'd say it's probably 10 by 6 or something, was for a porch. And of course, it threw him way out into the lawn. So, but again, and then there was Butlers lived next door to us. Of course, your mother didn't like. She hardly did anything. I got very friendly with him, and he had lost an eye there. I guess he was drunk one time, fell down, I don't know what he did, but he was the first guy that I think in Indianapolis ever had a Volkswagen. And then he had, what was the other? A big car, for a British car, but he always had trouble with him. Couldn't get him started, and I guess the electrical system was backwards from what it is here, and he had a hard time finding somebody to do it. So then, of course, I guess John White with Peerless Optical Company was starting to have some problems. So, and your mother didn't like Indianapolis at all. So, of course, we was on the corner by her, and there was a couple living across the street that, but they both worked, but they had a little girl. I don't know what they did with her. So there was nobody around her during the daytime. So she didn't like that at all. So now John called me and come back to. I drove home one weekend to talk to him. So and I turned in my resignation to Jack, and so that's when then we come back and got that house on Midoff Street, rented that till we got the house built out here. So again, of course, we got back into St. Leo's Church where I, school and everything, that's where I went through all that. We just lived over on Gate Street. So like I say, of course, when I come back there, if I stuck around with White Haynes for a little bit longer, I think I'd have been better off financially. But like I say, she didn't like it out there at all. And all our families back there, Chuck and Eileen come over a couple times. Tom come over with Mom a time or two. So, of course, Mom come out when the twins were. She helped out then. So we was away from the family, And of course, Gene and Grandma Glover too come. They come. Of course, he'd always bring me something. He brought me a lawnmower and all that kind of stuff. So he was all they would come and stay, a day or two. So I don't know.
House and stuff like that.
Oh well, yeah, of course, I guess my dad he went in. He started a practice up at Whittier and I never thought I'd get to, I always wanted to see the Grand Canyon. I never thought I'd see that, and I never ever dreamed I'd go to Rome. See, so that's in that respect, I've done very well, that I couldn't, the trips out west with them two girls, they really had that thing really, really nice. We just kept going right on around, and you got to, all the pictures I see, I think on the southern ones, but you got to get on what is that, Bryce Canyon? Boy, I tell you, of course, we fooled around too late that night. We were close to it, and then we had a hotel reservation someplace down the road, and then we was going to come back in the morning. We thought, well, while we're here, we ought to do it now, and then we won't have to backtrack. So that's what we did. But when we got over there, I just couldn't believe it, all that color and everything. And you could get down into it, but we didn't. It was going to get dark, and so we couldn't do that. So that was the only bad trip about that trip. Well, of course, I guess like everything else, you got to see it to believe it. That how it was. We did they did get a boat ride, but not over the rapids or anything like that. But when you're in there and you look up, you just can't believe it. It's straight up, And so that was really good. That was really a nice trip. I thought the way they organized it, and of course going to Ireland, I never ever thought I'd get to Ireland, And of course you went over first, I guess. That's what caused it. And then George and Patty went, and then of course your mother and me and Tom, we went, and Mary and Al too, yeah. So we had a good time that time. But the thing I remember was her name was Mrs. Wallace, was a B&B there in Limerick, and so we was there a couple days. Yeah. Oh, when we come back, it was. How was that? It's when we come back, because the first time we just stayed overnight, and then we went up the north, and so anyway, so we wanted to go to this castle thing they had, So I said, now if you're going to be out past midnight, I got a secret place for the key. Now says don't forget that. Be careful. So okay. So then finally we're going to be in later than that, So we got in there, and so I said, well, we said, well, now we're going to be late there, Miss Wallace. Where is that thing? It was on top of the frame door. God. But like I say, I never ever dreamed I went to Ireland. But after when you went over and said what it was, we all wanted to go. And of course, going to Rome, I never ever thought but I had never been on the continent, and I always wanted to go someplace there. I was thinking about Paris or somewhere. And of course, from Ireland, they all go down to Spain somewhere there and spend vacations and things. And I guess it's pretty cheap or whatever it is. The airfare, something that's only about an hour or something to fly down there, whatever. So, I really enjoy, and I can't believe that I got so sick after all the time I was there. I was feeling good. I didn't have no trouble breathing or anything, except my shoes I had on. My bottom of my foot hurt every night. But I just can't understand. And of course, I guess that room's something like the Grand Canyon. You got to see it to believe it. You know, you can't believe that. You know, so many things there. And of course, Rich LaRocca too. You know, he's looking up there and he said, you know, I'm an engineer. He says, but I think I'd have some problems in here doing what they did. You know, and how they did it, God only knows. I don't know. They must have to. Well, how by the time I don't know how they got up there. By the time he got up there, that must have took some time. And then to get up there, and what about all the stuff he has to have, the paint or whatever he has to do? So it's just, excuse me, it's just, you can't, well, you have, like I say, you have to see it to believe it. I couldn't believe half of it. I couldn't believe hardly any of it I saw. The only thing the thing I couldn't understand was those motor scooters. How they went around. You hardly ever saw a car, but I must have saw a million of those motor scooters. I'd parked every all way and everything. And two people riding on that thing. And at the light, something like Indianapolis. Everybody's jockeying for a position to get in front, I guess, you know. So, well, there must be some, where we are, was down there, where all well, I guess we was at the Vatican, weren't we? And I was going to say, I was thinking, there's never no manufacturing, but I guess that's really in Rome. We just went from Rome to get to the Vatican, I guess. But that's, like I say, and then of course getting the Pope that close, that was kind of the crown, you know. Nobody can hardly believe that, you know, and I couldn't believe it either, you know. In fact, we wouldn't have got. I think we thought that was going to be a 11 o'clock mass. A 12 o'clock mass, and it was 11 o'clock mass, so it was all half over. And when we got there, if we'd have been early, we'd have probably been in the crowd in there, sitting down somewhere. We never ever saw him then, you know. So sometimes things come out the best